Good evening, everybody, and welcome again to The Sacred Life. Once again, I am your host, David Baylor, welcoming you all, and I have with me my illustrious brother, John, who you can
Well,
see
hey
is
there.
John is quite a lot brighter than I am. It's just like
Well, I'm
materially manifest in the moment here. So
I'm a little older, and in those couple of years, I've
yeah,
learned a
he's
lot.
more illumined than I am, you might
Yeah.
say, or maybe just illuminated. But John is joining me. We're talking tonight about, well, we're kind of responding to a recent debate that happened between the Orthodox apologist Alex Soren and the Anglican apologist, the other Paul. Sorry if you're watching this, the other Paul. I don't know what your actual name is. I just know you as the other Paul. And he's an Australian, so you have to watch out. He might get a little fired up, which is not all bad. I think he's actually might be tuning in at some point, and maybe if we feel like it, we'll even invite him on the stream at some point. We'll just kind of see how it goes. But we're kind of responding in particular to one argument that he was laying out that Alex wasn't really responding to in that debate because he was making an argument from Origen, and Alex's response was, well, Origen is thrice a heretic, so we don't really see any reason to be convinced by anything that he is saying. And of course, the common argument about that is, well, even if Origen is a heretic, he still is an important witness of what was going on in his day. And so that's a valid point.
Well, also, I mean, he is like maybe the most brilliant Christian of his era, and probably the best educated Christian of his era. So, I mean, he's going to be a valuable source for some things, certainly. Um, what I've read of Origen, I've in some ways been quite impressed by his perspective, and I mean I think a lot of even the people that are anathematizing him were probably impressed with a lot
Mhm.
of the things that he had to say, and troubled by something that was deep in his perspective.
Yes.
But I think the people that write him off, I don't think they like totally throw him in the garbage bin.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point. And the common retort to those that want to say, Origen is a heretic, so we don't really see any reason to listen to what he has to say, is that he was highly respected in his day, and even after his day, he was highly respected. And a lot of our great fathers were like his students, or read his
Hmm.
works, or even quote his
Yeah,
works.
right.
That's all true, and we can still have a respect for him, even if we think he was wrong. Um, I'm not seeing any comments. I don't know if there's a bug. John, are you seeing any comments in the comments?
Nope.
Okay, maybe nobody's just commented yet. I'm just kind of surprised. Usually we have comments showing up by now, and there's enough people tuning in. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Hunter, for confirming that the comments actually do work. Yeah, I was just like, what's going on here? Anyway, yeah, so we can have a lot of respect for Origen and still think he's wrong, and we can agree with the premise. I think that he's an important witness of what was at least happening in Alexandria in his time. Now, at the same time, I think I can also say that if Origen is making an argument against icons and against the venerations of icons as it is practiced in the Orthodox tradition, as it is practiced, I would argue, in the patristic tradition, if he's making an argument against those things, I would be inclined to say that would be something that would naturally flow from the more problematic aspects of his Platonism and be something that is consequential of his unorthodox philosophical positions, the things for which he was later anathematized. So, like, I don't have to take those arguments seriously. But for the context of this conversation, I don't think we even have to grant that he says those things. So I don't think he holds the position that a lot of Protestant apologists trying to make an apology against icon veneration or a polemic against icon veneration. I simply don't think Origen actually is making those arguments. I don't think he's saying those things. I guess, in other words, what I'm saying is Origen is not a good proof text if you're trying to demonstrate that the early church did not venerate icons, or that the iconic principle of honor passes through the image to the prototype is not present in Origen's Christianity or in the Christianity of Origen's time. So that's kind of my basic premise, and we're going to go through some of the contentious quotes that are often brought out in proof of this. And I would mention, I should have put a link to that. Maybe I'll go back later if I remember and edit that. Where we have kind of covered some of these things already, along with some of the other common early Christian texts that are often used as, so-called proof text against icon veneration. So we have covered some of that before. There are just some specific things about Origen that I thought would be good to go over again in light of the recent debate. I don't know, John, before we get into that, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think my perspective on him is a little bit different than yours, and mostly I think he will talk about like we don't have temples, we don't have statues. Instead, we have the body as the temple, or the body as this, we are the statues. The way that we live our life is the image of God that's present in this world. And when we talked about it before, we looked at him and some other North African. So he's from Antioch, and I can't even remember specifically if it was a Clement in Antioch that had something similar to say, but there are several people from like Carthage, North Africa, which is quite a distance, but that also seem to state this like we don't use images kind of thing more strongly. So it does seem to me to be kind of a different tradition. I think that what he is saying is valuable, and essentially that in order for it to be valuable, somebody out there has to have temples and images and statues.
Yeah.
A big point that I made the time before was that when he is talking about the lack of images, the lack of symbols of the Christian faith, then he is using our lack of symbols as itself a symbol. And again, for it to have meaning, it requires somebody to have temples and somebody to have statues. So I might comment on that a little bit more later, but I don't think that he's. I don't think this guy's venerating images, and I think he's in a tradition that doesn't have temples. I think so, anyways.
Yeah, I think it's fairly obvious that I kind of disagree. I mean, I do disagree with that reading of Origen, but even if I would grant that reading of Origen, it's kind of not important because.
Well, that's different than saying that, having a temple is like foolish and evil or something like that.
Yeah. Well, and like I was saying, like even if I would grant that Origen doesn't have any of those things, I think the archaeological evidence strongly suggests that the Christians in Alexandria in Origen's day almost certainly had altars. Like altars in Christian archaeology predate Origen by quite a lot. And so I think the archaeological evidence really calls into question that reading of Origen. And I think that it's useful to get this out of the way because this isn't exactly the main content of our discussion tonight, but these are some valid points to kind of bring out. I would read Origen as saying something that a lot of Orthodox teachers are still going to say to this day when it comes to things like altars and temples and things like that, which is, especially as a polemic against what those things are in paganism and what those things are not in Christianity. When like what is really important in Orthodox theology is the idea that if we have an altar, like we do have altars, if we have images, we do have images, that the thing itself is really participating in something else. And the true altar for all Orthodox Christians is the altar in heaven, the altar that John sees in his vision in the book of Revelation, and those things. So like I would tend to read Origen more in that sense and see a lot of the way he says things as being much more rhetorical than literal.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, one of the passages that we might look at is also, I think, in English at least, it seems very ambiguous if he's saying, this is the way we are, or if he's saying, well, if you believe Celsus or Celsus, however you want to say it, I'll probably call him Celsus most of the time.
Yeah.
But if you believe him, then this is what we do. Sometimes it's a little hard to tell if he's talking about, even if he's talking about reality or what this other guy's saying about him. But
Yeah.
I was going to say thank you for saying Alexandria, because I'd said Antioch earlier, and when I was drawing a map in the air, I was drawing Alexandria and
Yeah.
Carthage, but that's not what I said. So yeah, he was from Alexandria. Okay, did you want to get into some of the text then, or some of the specific arguments?
Yeah, so I want to start off with there's a particular, I don't know if you have this, you can bring it up, from book 7, section
Okay,
44.
book 7 will take me just a minute because
Yeah, and if you could highlight the particular text, which I think is towards the end of chapter 44.
yeah, you can go ahead and put that up on the screen.
Okay.
Okay, well, I've got this, who are not ashamed to address inanimate things. Let me know if you want me to start before that.
So it should start with, so the quote I'm looking for in particular is like, for what reasonable man can refrain from smiling? That should be.
Okay, well, that'll be a little bit later then.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just right after that.
Yeah, right. But I want to focus on that quote in particular first, because that is specifically the quote that the other Paul brought out.
Okay.
So we're going to start there. So you can see, let me make sure I'm reading the same version that you've got here. For what reasonable man can refrain from smiling when he sees that one who has learned from philosophy such profound and noble sentiments about God or the gods turns straightway to images and offers to them his prayers, or imagines that by gazing upon these material things he can ascend from the visible symbol to that which is spiritual and immaterial? So if we take that, I guess at face value, I'll put it back up on the screen later. I took it off the screen because I actually don't want everybody reading the rest of the section yet. Because if we take that quote, just that quote, it seems to be saying something. And it seems to be like a pretty slam dunk. Like here, Origen is obviously saying, oh, the idea that gazing upon images and material, by gazing upon images and material things, we can ascend. This is the last line. We can ascend from visible symbol to that which is spiritual and immaterial. It's like, well, this is obviously a direct and unambiguous refutation of the iconic principle in Orthodox theology, in like Second Council of Nicaea, Seventh Ecumenical Council, or St. John of Damascus, St. Theodore the Studite, in their theology. Like, this is just like a direct refutation of that idea that by, giving honor to the image, it passes to the prototype. That, when we venerate an icon, that veneration then passes to the prototype, the one being depicted in the image. Which, one thing, I think the iconic principle is just like really misunderstood by a lot of people, and they think that we're talking about like this mechanical process when that's not what we're doing. That's not it's just simply not what it means. But yeah, so like it appears on its surface to be, like I said, a pretty slam dunk refutation of that. But I think if you read the entire chapter, it becomes pretty obvious that this is just simply not what Origen is talking about. So what I want to lay out beforehand, before I bring that back up on screen, I think we'll just go ahead and go through the whole chapter. These chapters are quite short. I don't know
Yeah.
unless you object to that, John, for any reason.
The only thing that I'll say is like these these things always make me think of music because the people who are opposed to imagery, paintings or statues or whatever, are not typically opposed to music. Everybody, all the Christian groups, and in some ways, the more you move away from the visual images, the more you move into music. But for me, I cannot comprehend like what's the different matter between art and music. Um, I mean, music is not a physical thing that you can touch, but I mean, it's still like a man-made thing. And when you're singing music, then your goal is to, you could say, like ascend from the visible symbol, ascend from the music itself to that which is spiritual and
Yeah.
immaterial.
So I guess I will respond to that a little bit. In fairness to the other Paul, he's not iconoclastic. He's an Anglican, and in his practice, they do use images. There are images in their churches, and he has no problem with that. He's not arguing against the use or the having of images. He's arguing
Yeah.
against the veneration of images. Like he sees that. If I'm understanding it, Paul, if you're watching this, you can correct me if I'm misrepresenting your position. Whether if you're watching this live or if you're watching this after the fact. But I mean, I think he's fine with the having and the use of image. He just has a problem with like bowing in front of images, kissing images, the kind of things. Well, there he is popping on. Um, Welcome, Paul. Glad to see you here in the chat. Yeah, you can correct me if I'm misrepresenting you, but like you're fine with the having of images. You just have a problem with the veneration of images. You have a problem with the iconic principle that if I'm venerating the image is going to the prototype. That's specifically what you're arguing against, and you're not an iconoclast. Picking up, we're gonna look at this entire chapter here. This is a good time, I think, Paul, for you to hop on because I just kind of recapped the quote that was read, and now we're going to look at the entire chapter. But before I bring that back up on the screen, I'm going to kind of present my premise first, which is that what Origen is actually talking about in this chapter is not what Paul was claiming, was thinking, was interpreting him to talk about. But Origen is actually making a very specific philosophical argument aimed at Celsus's. I don't know, is Celtus, would Celsus count as middle Platonic or is he early Neoplatonic? I think he's too early for Neoplatonism. I guess I should have looked that up beforehand to know exactly what philosophical school Celsus is operating in. But either way, Origen is arguing against a specific aspect of Celsus's philosophical system. And specifically what Origen is addressing in chapter 44 is the pagan idea of transcendence and refuting it with the Christian idea of immanence. So if you don't understand what I'm talking about, somebody watching this video, whoever you might be, just the idea that in pagan philosophy, what you are attempting to do is through the exercise. John, you can kind of help me explain this if I'm explaining this poorly. John is also well versed in these philosophical concepts and has studied these philosophies at least as much and probably more than I have. That, you know, in paganism, it's through like the exercise of the intellect, through contemplation, through reason, and through basically through our own actions, our own merits, our own virtue, that we transcend, that we attain like a higher state of illumination, or that we even like approach and come to see in as much as is possible for humans to see the transcendent divine. And Origen is pointing out that for Christians, that is just simply a ridiculous idea, and that it works the other way around, that God reaches down to us and raises us up. That is, it is all God, and not our I guess you could say not our works. um, but so we'll look at that. Oops, I guess I need to be the one to bring it up on the screen, not John. So I'll go ahead and put that back up. I'm going to go through the whole chapter
Yeah,
40.
I would say a lot of early Christians, in particular, when they're writing about pagan practices, pagan bowing down before idols and things like that, they are criticizing an idea that if I do this, if I offer this sacrifice, then I can get the God to do this sort of thing.
Yeah,
Or again, like my work will bring about some kind of reality here.
yeah,
For the pagan philosopher, I mean that sort of, you mentioned this kind of intellectual enlightenment or something, and that may be something um, that a lot of the good Platonic philosophers would want to maybe move away from the idol worship and into this less physical, more intellectual kind of spirituality. But you could say, yeah, there's
yeah.
the same kind of, I do the work and I get the enlightenment.
Right. Yes, and like I would say like that is a serious distinction between Platonic philosophy and Christian realist philosophy. Both have, I mean, both are realist. They're both realist systems. But there's a very important distinction between them, which is kind of what I've framed here as this. I mean, this isn't my terminology. I'm getting this from John Vervaeke. This immanence and transcendence, um, and pagan philosophy is transcendental, and Christian philosophy is immanence. So I will go ahead and read chapter 44 here, and I think maybe it'll become more clear what I'm trying to say here. So I'll start from the beginning, and I think most of the weight is actually at the beginning here. Um, so beginning chapter 44, Celsus supposes that we may arrive at knowledge of God either by combining or separating certain things after the methods with mathematicians call synthesis and analysis, or again by analogy, which is employed by them also, and that in this way we may, as it were, gain admission to the chief good. But when the word of God says, no man knows the Father but the Son, and he to whomsoever the Son will reveal him, he declares that no one can know God but by the help of divine grace coming from above, with a certain divine inspiration. Indeed, it is reasonable to suppose that the knowledge of God is beyond the reach of human nature, and hence the many errors into which men have fallen in their views of God. It is then through the goodness and love of God to mankind, and by a marvelous exercise of divine grace to those whom he saw in his foreknowledge, and knew that they would walk worthy of him who had made himself known to them, and that they would never swerve from a faithful attachment to his service, although they were condemned to death. Excuse me, or held up to ridicule by those who, in ignorance of what true religion is, give that name to what deserves to be called anything rather than religion. I'm going to go ahead and stop there for now. I think I actually read a little bit further than I needed to for the point I was making, because, like I said, the heavy weight in this chapter is those first few sentences, where Origen lays out his primary argument, and then he kind of expands on that a little bit throughout the rest of the chapter. But as you can see here, the primary argument Origen is making in this chapter is, again, like I've said, that pagans think that through their through their exercise of where does he say here? It's through synthesis and analysis, and by analogy, and by employing these rational faculties, by employing these mental exercises, through contemplation, through all of these things, that they're going to they're basically going to ascend to knowledge of the divine. And he's laying out, no, like, Christians understand that's ridiculous, because Jesus says, I like that. Using the quote from Jesus, from the quote from Christ here, to like very clearly illustrate the Christian principle as it operates in contrast. He says, no man knows the Father but the Son, and he to whomsoever the Son will reveal him. And this kind of shows how that process works hierarchically in Christianity. And if you want to understand that even further, I think in the future I plan to do some videos on the way that hierarchical structure works in the writings of Saint Dionysius, the Areopagite.
Good. In the contrast, in the first line, he's talking about, well, what Celsus thinks, the thing that's not true is that this is the Christian way, that you combine or separate certain things after the method what mathematicians call synthesis and analysis. And that's the way that you can come to knowledge of God.
Yeah.
And that would be the intellectual work. And if you would come to knowledge of God by that way, then there's a sense in which you would have a mastery of God, and God becomes an object that you study.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this is not the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And that, I mean, that really is like something that is a fundamental problem with middle and Neoplatonic philosophies, because like that kind of is what the divine becomes to them. Like it is kind of something to be studied, something to be grasped with the intellect. And this is the idea that Origen is refuting here. I kind of want to present the argument that that quote that I pulled out earlier, which is the quote that the other Paul was saying, is like a direct refutation of the iconic principle. Um, I really think what Origen is doing there is he's being kind of cheeky. He is taking Celsus's own philosophy and turning it against him and saying like, look, you're operating with, like, you're doing these things that in your own philosophy are ridiculous. Like this like violates your own principles. But beyond that, what he's also doing is, so the sort of thing he's describing here, imagine where he says like, let me read it again here. Let me find it on my page over here. I'll just read it where I have it in my notes over here. I don't know if it's the exact same. I think it is, but for what reasonable man can refrain from smiling when he sees that one who has learned from philosophy such profound and noble sentiments about God or the gods turns straightway to images and offers them his prayers, or imagines that by gazing upon these material things he can ascend from the visible symbol to that which is spiritual and immaterial. That, like, one of the central arguments I want to lay down is that within the context of what Origen is talking about in this chapter, what he's describing in this sentence is not something Orthodox Christians are doing. We don't think that by gazing upon and by venerating images and icons that we are going to transcend to some higher knowledge of the divine. We don't think that through the exercise of icon veneration, we're going to become enlightened. We don't think, we don't think we're doing what the pagans that Origen is describing are doing. We don't think what they think we don't think we're doing what they think they're doing through their actions. And so I would say the only comparison between Orthodox icon veneration and what Origen is criticizing here is strictly superficial. And that for this reason, this doesn't really amount to a substantive criticism of Orthodox icon veneration, or it doesn't stand as a suitable proof text to say, look, clearly Christians weren't venerating icons. And not only that, Origen finds the mere idea that the honor would pass through the image to the prototype, or that the idea would, or that like your veneration would transcend to a higher state, or that your engaging in icon veneration would be part of the process of you moving into a more spiritual worship. Like that's just fundamentally not what Origen is addressing here. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, John, or maybe even to push back if you see fit.
Well, I mean, in some ways, I'm not sure. I can see your interpretation where it's coming from. I don't see that, like, that you're bound to that sort of interpretation on this line here. I mean, we have talked about the well, here's what Celsus thinks, is that you can combine or separate, that you can synthesize and analyze, and then you can come to knowledge of God. And yet, even though he thinks that, he's doing this other thing that doesn't even fit. Um, that he can ascend from the visible to that which is spiritual and immaterial. Um, yeah, I don't know if when he says ascend here, I don't know if he's talking about knowledge of God in the same way there. But like I say, I can kind of see where your take is coming from. I don't know um, if I'm wholly persuaded of it. I am a little curious on your take on these next lines here, because Origen would do lots of this kind of thing right here in the next few lines, and I think there's something very powerful in these next few lines, and I also think that it implies a kind of ultimate importance of the physical universe, even though he's going to mention the shutting the eyes of the sense, raising the upwards the eyes of the soul. But I'll just read this and then just ask you for your take on these lines here.
Yeah.
But a Christian, even among the common people, is assured that every place forms part of the universe, and that the whole universe is God's temple. In whatever part of the world he is, he prays, but he rises above the universe, shutting the eyes of sense and raising upwards the eyes of the soul. And he stops not at the vault of heaven, but passing in thought beyond the heavens under the guidance of the Spirit of God. And having thus, as it had gone beyond the visible universe, he offers prayers to God. But he prays for no trivial blessings, for he has learned from Jesus to seek nothing small or mean that is sensible objects, but to ask only for what is great and truly divine. And these things God grants to us, to lead us to that blessedness which is found only with him through his Son, the Word, who is God.
Mm-hmm. I
So,
mean,
like I said, I just was curious what your take would be on this. And
yeah,
keep it. I mean, we're still in this iconic discussion we're having here.
yeah. I mean, I like that. I mean, I think it's worth pointing out. Like you're gonna find very very similar, uh, very similar statements to that in like the hesychastic saints, and figures like Saint Gregory Palamas,
Um,
and
to me, it was actually a little reminiscent of things like Maximus the Confessor will say
yeah,
about being in front of an icon,
yeah,
um, where like you're present before this thing, but there's this sense of in Maximus like the icon disappearing, where you begin to look through it and see the thing that is beyond it. And this where he says like shutting the eyes of the sense. Like I say, that sort of sounds to me like what Maximus describes when he is venerating an image.
yeah. I mean, I would think I mean honestly I would say kind of the same thing. I'm glad you brought that up from Maximus, so it doesn't sound like I'm just pulling that out of my rear
Yeah.
end when I say something like that. But it's like I legitimately don't see anything in what he's saying there that's incompatible with the practice of icon veneration.
Hmm.
Especially because like we really do believe that the highest form of prayer does transcend all of those things. And like I said, I brought out the hesychastic saints and what they have to say about this. And if you read things like the Philokalia, you'll find this idea all over the place, where it's like the purest, the truest prayer is that which transcends all of these things. And I like the way he's saying this. Um, you know, it doesn't stop at the vault of heaven, but passes beyond the heavens under the guidance of the Spirit of God. And I mean that's an important thing, under the guidance of the Spirit of God.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
like because it's important to remember like he is contrasting this with the pagan equivalent of like
Hmm.
pagan meditation.
Right.
Um I mean I really like the way he says this. And I think one thing I want to make clear is that icon veneration is not functioning within the realm of the things that's being discussed here. Like I'm not using so the iconic principle of the honor passing to the prototype, like this isn't something that like I'm using icons to attain this higher state of prayer. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of times, a monk in his cell won't have anything. There'll be
Yeah.
nothing in a monk's cell. Um, I mean, that's not always the case. There might be a few icons in a monk's cell. So, like, I'm not saying monks never have icons. That's definitely not what I'm saying. But what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying is like the iconic principle isn't like I'm using an icon as a tool to attain a higher state of prayer. Um,
Well,
rather, I'm
if you would say that, like just to look at Origen's language in here, which he's not saying you're using this as a tool, but this like very spiritual sounding journey that he's going on in the later part after where I've highlighted here,
mhm.
it begins in being in a place in the universe.
Yes. Well, yes, and that like how I would think of, and I guess if some Orthodox Christians would want to come in here and correct me if they see me erring what I'm saying here, but what I would think of with icons is again like an icon isn't like a tool that we're using for transcendence, which is what I perceive Origen is criticizing here. He's criticizing the use of images as a tool for transcendence, and that's not what
Mm-hmm.
icons are.
Yeah.
Rather, an icon is fundamentally something that helps us order ourselves properly in creation, and especially with the way God's grace has worked in and through creation. And like that's why like the incarnational principles are so important in icon veneration, um, and especially why it is that we can have an image of Christ who is God. I mean that's part of why that's so important. Like it's the use and the veneration of icons is fundamentally about us properly ordering ourselves before God with God's saints and in the world. And um, this kind of ascending prayer that Origen is talking about here, in contrast to pagan transcendence, is fundamentally something different. Um, so I would say, at the very least, I look at this passage and see basically nothing that is even relevant to the discussion of icons. Um,
Yeah,
and
although
this,
like I say, when I look at it, I see these things that sound like the way that Maximus talks about icons.
yeah, I mean that might very well be the case as well. I mean, I'd have to admit, off the top of my head, I'm not familiar with the passage that you're talking about, from Maximus, from Saint Maximus. Though I'm pretty sure you are reading that in a book that you borrowed from me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it would be in the 4th centuries.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's a lot. There's a lot in there.
Yeah, right.
Um,
But that's as precise as I can be. I can't quote it, but this just was an idea that came up a lot.
yeah. I will actually have to go and find that, because I mean I have read that. I just am not recalling it at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's kind of my. I don't know, John, if you have anything to add, but that's just kind of like my whole conclusion that I hope I have demonstrated properly, is that I just simply don't think that there's anything in this passage that's even relevant to the discussion of icons. I think
Yeah.
everything that's being discussed here is just unrelated.
Um, yeah, I mean, I do think, although I said I don't know if somebody's stuck with your conclusion, I do think there's some truth to what you're saying about that. Um, he is talking about um, the thought process of pagan philosophers when he's saying this.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, and but I mean, I guess in a sense, what I'm saying is like the thing that he says in this line that you keep quoting. The alternate version of it begins immediately afterward, and the alternate
Right.
version of it begins with, although it's talking about the universe, rather than like a painted image or a sculpted statue or a temple that's built by human hands or something. It's still beginning with reality.
Yeah.
And I guess I mentioned like there's something that's hard for me to make sense of what is the difference between an image and a song.
Yeah.
But in the same way, you can say there's also it's also kind of hard to make the distinction just between a physical part of the universe and an image. You know, other than the fact that one is made by man, and the other you could say is made by God, but um, there's still a thing that leads you through the same process. There's still a thing that when you meditate on it, your meditation passes through it, and on the other side of you, you're rising up beyond the vault of heaven, beyond the heavens, under the guidance of the Spirit of God. I mean, whether it's a man-made image or whether it's creation itself,
Yeah.
you're still like your aim is to see it and then to see beyond it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple more things I could add that I think that would make my point a little bit more clear. For one thing, in the passage in question, he does say that he imagines that by gazing upon material things, he can ascend from the visible symbol to that which is spiritual and immaterial, which is objectively not what the iconic principle is. The iconic principle is not that when I venerate an image, I transcend to a higher state.
Mm-hmm.
The idea is that when I am paying honor to something depicted in an image, the thing being honored is being honored, like the thing
Yeah.
being honored
Right.
that is
Right.
depicted in the image. Like that's what the iconic principle is that if I have up here in front of me a picture of a guardian angel, an icon of a guardian angel, and if I honor that image, then I am honoring my guardian angel. Like that's what the iconic principle is. It's not if I gaze upon and offer prayers and veneration to this icon that I myself am ascending. That is not what icon veneration is.
Yeah. Right.
Now that might be confusing to somebody like the other Paul, who or other Protestants watching this. That might be confusing at face value because obviously, and the stuff you reference from Saint Maximus, like obviously there's also something about the use of icons in our churches and all of these things being involved with us reaching a higher state. But what I would say is it's not, for one thing, again, it's not the gazing on these things or the offering of prayers to them that does that. That again, like I said earlier, the fundamental function of icons in our worship is ordering ourselves properly with the celestial hierarchy. And that is, according to this passage that you like, the end of this chapter, that is, according to Origen, what Origen is saying here, like the necessary first step in attaining true prayer is
Mm-hmm.
first like this proper ordering of ourselves with creation. And that is one of the things that we're doing. That's the primary thing that we're doing in icon veneration. Again, to understand that, you have to have this idea that most of what's going on, I like what he said. Where is that? But he prays for no trivial blessings, for he has learned from Jesus to seek for nothing small or mean, that is, sensible objects, but to ask only for that which is great and truly divine. And these things God grants to us, to lead us to that blessedness which is found only in him through his Son, the Word, who is God. And that's like a pretty good way of pointing out like a central principle in Orthodox prayer, which is that like Orthodox prayer is fundamentally not about getting things, but about aligning ourselves properly, ordering ourselves properly with God. And so again, that's the primary function that icons play is, first ordering ourselves with the way in which God has acted in his creation, first ordering ourselves properly with God's creation. And then most of our prayers, are about repentance, are about cultivating that proper relationship, about changing ourselves, changing us, not getting things from God, not like attaining to something through our own rigor. I mean, which that's like honestly a temptation that like I really face as a Christian all the time, is the kind of thing that the pagans believe, which is that if I am better at my prayer and if I can just develop this rigor and this discipline of myself, then that will help me achieve this higher spiritual state. And that, of course, is garbage.
Yeah, first something really unrelated, and then I'm gonna tag on to that. In my view that's on the screen right now, I don't know if this is just a display thing or a camera thing, but my blinds in real life don't look anything like what they look on this camera here. So
Yeah, they're all stripy and
stripy and like they bounce when
yeah,
I
they're
when I
like
move the desk. Look at this.
right. I see that. They're like
This
I
is
don't
really
know.
weird. But
I,
anyway, that's
I thought maybe there was an animal back there playing with it or
no,
something.
no, that's just when I bump my desk. Apparently, my blinds behind me are moving a foot up and down.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't know. That's weird to me. But I did say I was going to say something that was kind of related also.
I don't
When you're
know. I
talking,
think by gazing on that image behind you, I'm ascending to a higher spiritual state.
uh, maybe I don't know. You got to have a mechanically induced spiritual experience there.
Yeah.
That's a like a Joseph Campbell, Carl Jung kind of term there for
Right.
referring to taking drugs, psychedelic
Right. I was
drugs.
just going to say another way to say it is it's kind of trippy.
Yeah, right. Okay, so you're talking about this. You don't ascend. That's not what you're doing when you're looking at an image. You're not ascending to some higher plane or something. What you're doing is you're honoring something that's worthy of honor.
Well, yeah, and it's like
And
the same idea from St. Paul that it's like, it's not that we have ascended, but it's that he has descended to raise
mhm,
us up with him.
yeah, right.
And like that's the fundamental principle that's operating here.
Yeah, but I do want to say like there's something that is very positive that happens within you, which you could
Mhm.
say would be like easy to confuse with this idea of ascending that you're trying to criticize. But they're
Yeah.
like if if you honor something that deserves to be honored, that brings about positive transformation in you.
Well, yes. Yeah, and that's kind of I guess what I'm trying to communicate with this like
But that's
ordering
very
yourself,
different.
aligning
That's very
yourself.
different than you earning something, like working to achieve becoming a better person or something
Yeah,
like that. That's not
right.
what happens.
Yeah, right. And that, yeah, like I was saying, that's what I'm trying to get at with this idea of ordering yourself properly with a celestial hierarchy.
Hmm.
And I hope that's a good teaser again for talking about Saint Dionysius at some point in the future. Because hopefully some people are like, celestial hierarchy, what are you talking about?
Oh, I thought you were talking about Hildegard von Bingen.
Oh, well, she's just talking about Saint Dionysius. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't think we'll look at those other passages, and this is the one you really wanted to talk about, anyways, because that was the one that was in the video.
yeah. I mean, there's a few other things we could say. I don't know if we have to look at the other passages as such. Um, but I do really want to stress this point that the overarching theme of the whole book of Contra Celsum is, am I saying that it is a Contra Celsum with an M?
Yeah.
I think it is, yeah. Like the overarching theme of this whole book is this contrast between, I guess we could call it pagan works righteousness, where they think, again, this principle that like this transcendence principle, where either by doing things to gain the favor of the gods, or by this more philosophical system that's being discussed here in chapter 44 of book 7, um, that by doing either of these things, it's basically by their own merits, by their own strength. And that really is how the pagan world operates. That's how pagan philosophy operates. That's how pagan religion operates. That it's all about what I do as an individual. And this is what makes me a good and a virtuous person or an enlightened person. And like there's nothing in there about the divine Godhead extending grace to me in order to raise me up. There's nothing about the divine logos of God descending so that it can raise me up, so that he can raise me up with him. There's nothing of that in paganism, nothing at all. Um, in fact, like pagan philosophy is like often like grasping with this question, like, can you even approach the divine logos? Is that something that humans can even comprehend? Like, is it so utterly transcendent that it's beyond all knowing? And this is just like such a stark contrast. And again, this is the principal confrontation between Celsus and Origen. Are these two completely opposed ideologies? These two completely opposite understandings about how enlightenment, you might say, or about how salvation works. Um, and like, I really do think that if you read the passage that we were just dealing with, or read the other common passages that again we have addressed in another video, um, that would seem to refute the use of icons and altars and so forth in Christianity, that if you read those as that is what Origen is arguing, then you lose what Origen is actually talking about. You lose what his argument actually is, um, and you miss kind of the rhetoric that he's using in order to combat this pagan philosophy.
Yeah, well, I think it's very easy, if you're trying to look through whether it's church fathers or Origin, who's not a church father,
Hmm.
um, or just historical people that wrote something, or you could do this with Bible verses as well. If you're just trying to prove your points, then you can find the couple of sentences that prove your point,
Right.
and um, like act like you understand what the person was saying. And I mean, for me, this kind of like mystical vision that I keep pointing at in the last part, like this is the kind of thing that Origin is all about for
Yeah.
me. It's
Right.
like this. I mean, here he will talk about the the universe, the whole universe is God's temple, and elsewhere when he says other things that people try to use in this debate about icons or about whether Christians should have temples or not, and the point that he's making is not a point about whether we should have temples or not. And maybe you can try to infer something from that, but that's not what he's talking about. What he's
Hmm.
talking about is that your bodies are the temple of God,
Yeah.
and that the way that you live your life is an image of God
Hmm.
for the rest of the world to see. And like I say, you can try to infer things about what he's saying about images, but like there's a like a very grand and beautiful mystical vision that he's presenting that like you are totally blind to if you're trying to read it in that way.
Hmm. Yeah. And I agree. And like, I think a lot of these, well, for one thing, I want to say Origin can be a difficult read.
Hmm.
He does. I don't know if rambling is the right way to say it,
Yeah,
but like you kind of see that in this passage here, where like it's actually kind of hard to keep track of what he's what he's trying to say here.
yeah,
I mean, I think when you really sit down and examine it like we're doing here, it's it's not that hard to suss it out. But when you're sitting down and reading Origin, like you really have to pay attention to what you're reading. I mean, he is a deeply philosophical writer,
hmm.
and things like that can oftentimes be really difficult to read. And
Well, he's
so,
also, I mean, he is like an extreme genius. I mean, like,
yeah, right, yeah,
and I just mean that like in the IQ sense. I'm
yeah,
not even really saying that as like a compliment, really, but just saying like what he's holding in his head, he might just assume you'll be able to hold it in your head too.
yeah, right. I mean, and that is something like his contemporaries definitely understood about him. It's like
Yeah,
this man is absolutely brilliant, and like even people who you know we regard him as a heretic, like we still acknowledge like this was one of the smartest people ever.
yeah, right.
Like maybe the only person smarter than him is Saint John of Damascus. It's like there's a very, very small list of people that we would possibly put above Origin in terms of intelligence.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
so it's like don't disrespect his intelligence at all, but like yeah, like Saint John of Damascus has a similar problem that it's like it's a labor to read him. And like I guess that's what I'm saying about Origin. It's like it can be difficult to read Origin, and I'm not going to make any assumptions about the other Paul, but I do think a lot of the people quoting Origin for polemics against orthodox positions or for polemics against icon veneration haven't actually read the text. And part of the reason they haven't read the text is because it's a difficult read.
Yeah, well, part of it is also like reading the text had nothing to do with what they were trying to do with the text.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's true. Like I'm trying to be generous with the way I address other people.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I'm not. I'm looking at the, you could say, like the polemic tendency within myself, which I try not to nurture too much. But um, but if I were in their position doing what they're doing, then that's what I would be doing.
yeah, yeah. Um, I'll have to say the rapid development of AI has been good for me in kind of reining in the polemic tendency within myself, is because it's like I can kind of use AI to rein myself in a way where there's no ego at stake.
Yeah.
It's like I don't have to win an argument with anybody. Like I'm not worried about losing face, which is
Oh
like
yeah.
those are all negative traits, but it's like, you're dealing with a machine, and it's like if I know I need kind of I don't know, I need myself to be grounded in reality a little bit.
Well,
I found AI useful to that end.
a more popular way to use AI is that it can actually just encourage you in your delusions.
Right. Yeah, I was gonna say I think most people use AI for the opposite.
Yeah. Right.
Um, but no, AI will do what you tell it to do. So
Hmm.
if you tell it to argue this position or help me come up with this argument or help me, prove this, then that's what it's going to do. And so if that's the way you use AI, then it's obviously going to reinforce what you're saying. But if instead you use AI and you're like, AI, tell me that I'm wrong and why I'm wrong, then
Yeah.
that's what
Right.
it's going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, don't trust it. Don't take it as an authority, but I don't know. It has a usefulness. Like I use AI when I'm doing a stream like this just to kind of create my list of bullet points with the list of arguments that I have previously fed to it. Like
Well,
it's
unless you
useful for
want to
that.
talk another hour about the theology of AI, then
No, I don't. I just, it's interesting to throw those things in a little bit. We can stop there. I don't know
okay.
if we
Well, sure.
have.
I see the workshop behind you and a few icons in process
Yeah,
there
those are
behind
actually
you.
aren't those actually aren't mine. Those are some ones for Brian, the iconographer
Yeah.
I work for. I'm an apprentice to Brian Matthew Worledge, the iconographer. And those are some ones that I gilded for him.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
And a lot of those are boards
yeah,
behind your head there too.
those are just, well, most of them anyway. Those are just pieces of wood. They don't have any gesso on them yet, but yeah. So
Yeah.
I think you're trying to prompt me to pitch my wares.
Yeah. Sure.
I am an iconographer, and I just happen to have some handy images that I can pop up on screens. Gregorius Iconography is my business. So as you can see, I have a vested interest and a monetary interest in
Yeah. Yeah.
defending
Full
icon
disclosure
veneration.
here.
Full disclosure here, I'm a grifter. This is all a grift. Um, but no, I am an iconographer, Gregorius Iconography. There's a link to my website in the description. And if you're watching this after the live, then I will also probably have a few products linked. They might appear on screen or in the description. I don't know how that works actually. Where you can check on my website. I do custom icon commissions. And I would appreciate if you want to reach out. If you have a project you'd be interested in, I will probably be able to get to it a lot quicker than most iconographers because I haven't been doing it as long as a lot of others have. And so my catalog hasn't filled up 3 years into the future like every other iconographer I know. So yeah, if you have a project, especially a project you'd like to turn around fairly quickly, throw up some examples of my work. I've got a lot of positive feedback on this one. Actually, Kyle King, has a copy of this that is in his videos, all his videos now. So if you
Yeah.
watch Barrel Age Faith, you'll see this icon behind him. Just some examples of my work. Again, you can check that out in the description. And of course, I have to have my patron saint, Saint Gregory Palamos, up there. So yeah, if you're interested in that, reach out. Got a project you'd like to talk to me about? I'd love to talk about with you. I also do sell some prints. I don't have everything on my website right now. I have most of the stuff that I've done on my website right now, but I make my own prints right now. Maybe at some point in the future, if I get busy enough that I don't really want to do that, then I'll have somebody else make them for me. But I can do that. Then I also, John was talking about the boards. I also do make and sell true gesso icon panels, icon boards, solid wood primarily, using traditional like rabbit skin glue, or I actually use gelatin instead of rabbit skin glue, but it's actually the same glue. It's just an easier form of the same glue, and chalk dust. That's how I make my boards. So I do sell those as well. You can find that on my website. If you have, I do a lot. I've been doing a lot of custom orders for odd or large size boards, so you can check that out as well. We are also thinking about. I mean, we're not thinking about. We are going to do it. I just, it's been super busy with Lent and Holy Week, and then I'm also getting married. By the way, oh yeah, by the way, I'm getting married. So if you want to support that, I just buy some icons off me, guys. You always got to use your things in your personal lives as ways to convince people to give you more money, right?
Yeah, I think the fire comment was for somebody excited about you getting married.
I actually think that came up before.
Oh, okay.
I said that.
All right.
But I like the I put it up just because I like the picture there.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of myself. No, we are. I want to do some content, and we've talked about it here on the show about, or those of us here on the Sacred Life on our channel, about doing some content, kind of going through, like what happened after the Book of Acts, and kind of looking through the history of the church, and maybe doing it in a little bit more of a dramatic way, more of in a storytelling style of that, rather than like a dry historical lecture. So I want to do that and kind of tell the story of the church and maybe correct some of the erroneous notions people have, and really tell the story of God's faithfulness, because that's what the story of the church is. And then another thing, I've been in discussions. I don't know if I should say this publicly, but I think it's far enough along that I'll go ahead and say it. I have been in some discussions with Father Jonathan Ivanoff over at the Transfigured Life, and hopefully, Lord willing, we're going to be doing some collaboration, some content in the near future, tackling some Anabaptist, maybe some Anabaptist content or some Anabaptist claims, some Anabaptist teachings. So that'll be fun. And then in addition to that, the three of us at the Sacred Life, John, Aaron, who's not with us tonight, and myself, would like to kind of get back into to doing some more Anabaptist themed content, which in relation to that, we do have a comment from Judah Stahl. He says, "Thank you for sharing your journey to Orthodox. I'm an Anabaptist as well, and it's fascinating and very encouraging to see other Anabaptists struggling with the same thing I am facing and finding a way." And I would just say, Judah, you're far from alone in those struggles. That's one thing I've found out, kind of because of the Sacred Life, and especially some of our videos that went, I don't know, sort of viral, picked up a lot of views for us, and kind of were widely circulated in the Orthodox world. The surprising number of people who kind of have a very similar experience to ours, have struggled with the same things, and a number of people that have come to the Orthodox Church from our same background, or who are kind of, maybe in the same place that you are, Judah, with, still being, I don't know, one or both feet in the Anabaptist world, but struggling with some of those things. And we hope we can be kind of a help and an encouragement as you kind of grapple with those things. I don't know, John, do you have anything? Because John kind of stands in a different position on all of that than I do. is kind of in a different place. Though I insist that John doesn't know it yet, but he will be he will be Orthodox.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't deny. I would say it's possible. I have um, reasons for where I am right now. That
Right.
where I am right now doesn't frustrate me in any way.
Yeah.
Um, um, but yeah, I don't know. Like I, I, at the same time, I won't deny what you say.
Right. No, I
um,
actually think we could have some interesting discussions between the two of us, and maybe with Aaron as kind of a guy who sits between where me and John are at in terms of things about ecclesiology and what is the church and those kinds of questions. So I think me
mhm.
and John are kind of at this point have a little bit of a different opinion about that, and I would look at you, John, as having the opinion that we once shared, and I've kind of moved on to adopting
I don't
more of
know.
the
Maybe I'm not really sure. I don't know. I guess I don't know where you were
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I'd be up for the conversation. Not right now, though. I think we
Right.
should get to bed pretty soon.
No, no, that's I gotta say on some of the other shows the other night I was on Alex Soren's stream with Cassian, Kyle King, and Father Stephen DeYoung. Um, and I wasn't there for the whole thing, but I think that stream ended up being like 5.5 hours.
Oh,
So
yeah,
in the Orthodox world right now, like an hour long stream, like that's nothing.
yeah, right,
All these guys are doing like 4 or 5 hour streams. It's just
yeah.
kind of become the way. So being at this kind of
Well,
like
I mean,
chill hangout time is
there's definitely demand for it.
yeah. Anyway, I feel like I kind of interrupted you in the middle of something. I asked if you had a response to what I was saying to Judah's comment over here.
Um, yeah, I don't know. Not in particular. I mean, struggling with the same thing I am facing and finding a way. I mean, maybe that's maybe you feel like you found a way more than what I have in some ways, I guess. But like I say,
Hmm.
I'm satisfied where I am right now, but I don't have this feeling of permanence about where I am right
Yeah.
now. Um, um, but I don't know. I think for me, I haven't. It's been longer for me since I've been part of an Anabaptist church, so I've kind of always still felt myself to be very much an Anabaptist. But if you're not part of the church, then like you're not really an Anabaptist. But I mean, it's sort of like in some ways right now I feel like um, there are some ways in which I would think of myself as being Orthodox, and yet like no, I'm not part of an Orthodox church. You know, Orthodox is not part of the church.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't know. I'm not any of the things that I feel like I am.
Yeah. I mean, it gives us kind of a fun dynamic here at the Sacred Life, though, because you, Aaron, and myself are all at very different places right now,
Hmm.
and so that means even though like when I do my solo content here, it's all going to be like obviously very orthodox because I have been baptized into the Orthodox Church, and so obviously like I need to submit myself to the authority of the church and not contradict the church.
Yeah,
That's part of it, but like also like I believe the church is correct, so I don't want to defy and contradict it. So like obviously my stuff is gonna be pretty orthodox, but like when you come on, that's part of the reason why I hoped Aaron could have made it as well, but Aaron has a lot of responsibilities right now, and it's harder for him to make, especially a late night stream like this. But I like it when if you can come on a stream like this because you're not going to see things the same way that I do on a topic like this. You're not
hmm
going to read Origin in the same way that I do, and it's kind of useful to kind of have that back and forth. And I like that. I like that about our dynamic that we have right now because it makes us unique.
yeah,
Um, we can have kind of a different sort of conversation, and it's like even though I don't know, you and I have kind of formulated our positions together over the years. Like we are different people in a very different place, and we're going to see things differently.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
And
mostly my take is that the church is sick,
Yeah.
and that the Orthodox Church has the medicine, that
I
that we
mean,
need.
I,
And for some people, that means they need to become Orthodox. I mean, if there's somebody that listens to our channel and becomes Orthodox as a result of it, then like that is thrilling to me.
yeah. Well, I will
Um,
confirm that that has happened.
yeah, right. And
Um,
and I don't think that that's the only outcome that should happen. I think there are still going to be people that are going to remain very devoted to their communities that they're a part
mhm.
of, and I think that also is a good thing. And hopefully they can find some treasures that they can bring back with them back to their home where they're
Yeah, yeah.
where they feel like they are supposed to be.
Well, like it's like my hope honestly would be that people like you and Aaron and those other people that you're talking about is that you can kind of like inoculate those communities with the truth that I think is uniquely that I think uniquely belongs to orthodoxy because I do believe orthodoxy is the church. And like that doesn't mean that everybody else is wrong about everything. I mean, I don't want to get into that whole thing right now, but like I would hope that maybe there's a sense in which that truth can be taken and kind of like inoculated into those other communities, and that it would ultimately result in their reunification with the church. Like that really is, I think there are, as history unfolds in America, there's multiple ways because like this might sound kind of crazy at first, but that's basically the history of my parish that I'm describing.
Right.
Is
Yeah.
is like a bunch of people that got inoculated with bits of the truth, and then eventually just realizes like we just got to become Orthodox, and they joined
Yeah.
the Orthodox Church. I mean, that's kind of a super simplistic way of putting it, but like this sort of thing can happen and has happened in America already. Um, and I would just kind of hope that that pattern continues to unfold. I mean, like I'm excited to see um, Orthodox Studies Institute when they put out in a few days. They're going to put out a more detailed report. But before Pascha, they projected, according to the numbers that they had, that they thought 20,000 people were going to be received into the Orthodox Church around Pascha nationwide, which is an enormous number of people for the
Hmm.
Orthodox Church in America. Um, and I'm excited to see what their actual numbers come out to be. Their more refined numbers, their more
Yeah.
refined
Right.
report comes out to
Yeah.
be. But it's like I don't know. I guess where I'm going with that is just like there's a lot of really positive things happening, and it's like you say like the church is sick, and that's just something for me. Like I think you see that, John, just how different my attitude is about like basically everything since coming to the Orthodox Church. And one of the biggest reasons for that is because the church that I was in was sick, and I didn't see any alternatives that weren't at least as sick.
Yeah.
And
Right.
like when people ask me how I came to the Orthodox Church, a lot of times my answer is like they had to drag me kicking and screaming because it's like this, John. It's like it's not what I wanted to do,
Yeah. Right.
but like I don't regret doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just smiling because the whole time I was like constantly trying to convince you, like, they're not as bad as you think they are, Dave.
Hmm. Yeah, I will say that what John said is something that I had to confess.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't know. That's I don't know, kind of our rant. That's I mean a little bit tangentially related to the topic of the video, but I guess I'm becoming more accustomed to the way a lot of a lot of the live streams work on this space now, which is, you kind of have your topic at the beginning, and then you just kind of branch off into other things once you're done with that. I don't know if there's anybody. The live viewer count, I've learned on StreamYard here, is kind of like completely unreliable. So I actually have no clue if there are still very many people logged in or not. But if there is anybody, if you have any comments or you have any questions, or even if there's somebody that would like to hop on and continue the conversation when John hops off, I might be willing to stick around for a little bit. I think John's ready to go pretty soon.
Yeah, I got work in the morning, and as a teacher, I'm always not ready for work when it's 11 p.m. I'm still not ready for tomorrow, really. So I do need to get off, get some sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, I will go ahead and put a link. I put a link in the comments. Hopefully, you guys can see it if anybody wants to hop in, or any other questions come in. John, I guess you can go whenever you want, unless you have some closing remarks or some comments that you'd like to make.
I don't know. I wonder if it's worth returning to the passage here, but I'm pretty satisfied with this. I guess you mentioned Dionysius, and I wonder, like this, every place is part of the universe, and that the whole universe is God's temple. I'd be curious. I'm just not that familiar with him, but I'm familiar with some of the influence that he's had.
Mm-hmm.
On like where he comes into other traditions, other Christian traditions, I mean, but like some of his influence on literature and on English mysticism and all this. And I guess I'd be curious to see if they're echoing each other in words like that or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'd be a good thing to explore. I guess I'm not super prepared to.
That's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Right now, more of what I was bringing out when I was talking about Dionysius, Saint Dionysius, was this this hierarchical understanding of things,
right,
in relation to the iconic principle.
Yeah.
Because like that is an important thing to understand if you're going to understand our theology of icons. Is this hierarchical, like the celestial hierarchy, this hierarchical ordering of reality, and that one of the reasons why the veneration of icons we see as a necessity. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a good enough word, as a necessity, is because of the need for us as humans who are disordered and live in a disordered relationship with the world and with the celestial hierarchy. Sorry, it's getting late. I can't speak anymore. Because we're disordered and have this disordered relationship with the celestial hierarchy, that we do need to reorient ourselves, to reorder ourselves, to to take these steps and undergo these actions and do these things to reorder ourselves, to put ourselves back in a proper relationship with creation.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there's so much, and I haven't actually read this whole work. I've read lots of little passages from it. But yeah, I mean, there is a lot of this broader perspective that I really like. And as I said before, it's kind of a shame anytime you hear somebody, anytime I come across somebody like quoting Origen, they're just trying to make some point or another about icon veneration.
Yeah.
Or
which, I mean, there's a whole lot in Origen that those people would not like.
Yeah, right.
I
Yeah,
mean,
but I think
including things in Origin that Orthodox Christians would like.
yeah, right.
I mean, it's like using Origin. I did want to say this, that using Origin as an argument against icons coming from most Christians is kind of silly because of the other things that he dismisses. He seems to dismiss, I should say, in those passages. Even though in those passages where he seems to dismiss images, um, he also then comes back and explains that he doesn't actually dismiss those things. He just says Celsus accuses him of doing that.
Yeah, right.
But anyway, we did address all that in a different video, and I don't know that we have to recap it all again. And plus, people have recapped that ad nauseum. But I was particularly interested in looking at the philosophical points that Origin is making, because I think that's what's lost on a lot of people misusing Origin in the way that they are, is that they misunderstand that his argument is a philosophical one, and that the argument that they're making is incompatible with his philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, I think of like I've used the word mystical before, but I think of like there's just such a rich mystical vision in Origin that again, if you're using him to proof text some point, then like his actual vision is totally irrelevant to whatever point you're trying to prove. And so like the thing he is actually saying is totally invisible to your eyes. You would never even notice that he's saying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And again, I think that's the exact same thing with the Bible, with the way people use the Bible. If you're trying to prove some point with it, then like it is saying things. It has a vision that you just will not see because you're too busy trying to prove your point.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I mean that's a good. I don't know. I want to say a lot to that, but I think like we should just kind of like take that and stick it in our pocket and talk about that more in depth at some point, because that is actually a very important point that you're bringing out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's something, in some of our private correspondence, that's something that you've brought up as something you'd like to talk about anyway, if I remember right. Or maybe
Yeah, and it's just, I mean, part of the reason I notice it so much here is because I know the Bible more than I know Origin, you know? And
Yeah,
so
right.
if I run across a quote from Origin, it's coming from something that I haven't, or like I encounter quotes from him from things that I haven't read, and so it's just a quote in isolation. And then I've gone and I've read the thing that the quote comes from.
Yeah.
And so like I've really had this experience in a kind of profound way with I mean really with him in particular, where I just got this chance to see like, oh, the quote is like meaningless, like this is not the thing.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of the point that we're making in this video, is like you pull these quotes out of context, and on face value it seems pretty obvious. Oh, this says this, absolute defeater for exposition. And then you read them in context and it's like, this doesn't say that at all. Like this is just has nothing to do with the point that Origen is actually making in this passage.
Yeah, and even if like I say, I don't think you're bound to your interpretation of it. So even if you would say, well, yes, that's relevant, that's still not what he's talking about. So like you've proved your little point, at least you can think you've proved your little point. But like he was saying something totally different than that.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have taken that passage off a long time ago. Somebody asked, have we already discussed the quote on screen? It's like, yeah, like an hour ago.
Well, yeah, I mean that was the focus of the first half of or so of our video.
Yeah, I mean a little bit more. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I'm just it's like, yeah, we did discuss that at length, and we're just kind of recapping our whole argument right now. Which again, since you did miss it,
your response was to hide the quote that he was really, or the passage he was really interested in.
Yeah, no, you just drew attention to the fact that I was being neglectful of managing the studio here. But no, basically our argument is what we were just talking about here, is like that using the quote as a proof against icons just has absolutely nothing to do with what Origen is talking about in that chapter. We did have somebody, and he just responded actually with the response, because I didn't get around to it yet. He said, "Good evening, Christ is risen," and I am obligated as a good Orthodox Christian to say, "Indeed, he is risen." And those who know that I am OCA maxing. OCA is the one true Orthodox Church.
Oh boy.
John has no idea what's going on.
Well, not really, no.
um, yeah, I mean, boy, there's a whole lot of things we could get into. Like, I'm not going to hold you around and make you talk about this, but I might keep talking about it a little bit after you go on. And again, I did put the link here in the chat, and if anybody does want to hop on, you're free to do so, and maybe you can replace John, and I'll stick around for a little bit. But one thing I really would like to do a show on sometime is talking about like the philosophical underpinnings that operate like under everybody's religious beliefs. It's something I've kind of been playing around with it. Like I have the theory that you really have a hard time showing people that they're doing this, but that people have a whole list of presupposition, a whole list of ideas, and really a philosophical system that leads them to the conclusions that they do. And they think their reading of the Bible is obviously true. And this is part of the reason, going back to our arguments against sola scriptura, this is one of my arguments for a long time against sola scriptura, is that absolutely nobody on the face of the earth is sola scriptura, and nobody ever has been, because it's impossible. You're always going to approach the scripture with a list of presuppositions. And one thing that I really want to do at some point is to demonstrate to people that in the case of almost everybody, especially Protestants, that they have a philosophy that informs the way they approach the Bible, and that philosophy is not Christian.
Yeah. And you can say if you have some preconceived notion that determines what you see in Scripture and what Scripture is saying, then Scripture is not the foundation of your belief.
Yeah. Right.
And I like it, and I'm not saying like therefore you're evil when I say that, but I'm saying like therefore you're not sola scriptura.
Yeah.
And so it's strange to make a morality that says you must be sola scriptura,
Right.
when like that just doesn't accurately reflect the way that reading Scripture works.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I would extend that a little bit also and say, like, you're making a pretty serious error, and the serious error is one that you have been taught to make, which is avoid philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is like one of the most insidious things that has happened in kind of the fallout of the Reformation, is people being taught that philosophy, and like even encountering this from friends of ours that are Roman Catholics who treat philosophy as though it is something unrelated to theology. And like that just like shocks me, because it's like, John knows what I'm talking about, but it's just like, have you read the Church Fathers? It's like philosophy is like all they ever talk about. And like philosophy and theology are not, like, theology is philosophy. And all of our theological language is borrowed from philosophy. But yeah, like
I think theology is the queen of the sciences.
Yeah.
And it's like you could say you're passing through philosophy on the way to theology. But I mean, there's a sense in which I look at literature as being that way, as an English teacher and a kind of to some degree, a literature guy. Literature, I view literature as being like always, in all cases, literature is religious.
Yes.
And it's asking religious questions, and it's like it's exploring, and like it's exploring um, the nature of God and the nature of man as he should be, and what it is like to be separated from God. And that's what it's doing. I mean, whether it's using religious language or not, that's what literature is doing. But I mean, you could kind of like, I feel like you're saying something similar about philosophy. It's like, well, it's always in some way pointing toward God, or what is the experience of the absence of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, kind of my contention is that philosophy is theology. So, like, if you read Plato, like what Plato's doing is theology, and a lot of it is anyway. And I kind of think the distinction that exists in the modern mind between philosophy and theology is largely arbitrary, and it's like artificial categories that have been imposed in modern times, in modernity, that did not exist in the minds. I don't know. It's probably before modernity that this happens. This might be like a scholastic thing. I'm not certain about that, but it might be like a late medieval phenomenon. But what was I saying? Yeah, it's kind of like these artificial categories that have been imposed on two things that I really think the church fathers understood as being primarily the same thing. Because again, if you read like the acts of the ecumenical councils, or if you read the writings of the church fathers, or if you read St. John of Damascus, is what they are calling theology, what they are dealing with in terms of theology is very often what modern people would want to call philosophy. And so, like, Father Stephen DeYoung made a very good point when I was with him on stream. I feel like John's being invaded.
Yeah, but by a cat.
Yeah. No, I was invaded by a cat a long time ago, and I subdued
Yeah,
it and conquered it.
yeah.
Um,
My cat
um,
sounds like she's got different needs than yours.
yeah.
Yeah, she's begging for something or another.
Okay. But anyway, Father Stephen, he made this very good point. On the stream where I was with him, where he said that what people think is important in theology is always going to be what is necessary in their soteriology. And I thought like that was a very good observation. And like part of the thing it helped me to understand is why it is that like evangelicals will see the ecumenical councils as squabbling over minute details that don't matter. It's
Hmm.
like in the minds of the people having the ecumenical councils, these were matters of life and death. These were
Yeah,
not
and
minute
also that
details.
that person will dismiss something by saying, "What does this have to do with salvation?
Yeah,
Is
right.
this necessary for salvation? If not, then why are you even bothering about it?"
Uh-huh. And of course, the answer is yes. It is necessary for salvation. This
Yeah,
has
right.
everything to do with salvation. It's
Yeah,
just your
right.
your your concept of salvation is mixed up.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and I just thought that was like a very, very good observation, and that how it relates to what we're talking about with philosophy here is I think that's one of the reasons why we've ended up taking all of these things and cutting them off from theology and putting them in a different category, is because in the soteriological models we've constructed, there's not a place for all of these things, but we also don't want to like blatantly disrespect the tradition that produced all of these things. So we just have to figure out a different category for them.
Hmm.
And I kind of think that's what's happened.
Yeah, and that's I mean, back to this. What is salvation? The soteriology that you're talking about.
Hmm.
Um, for me, like that has been one of the best things about exploring orthodoxy. I'll say, because I'm not orthodox, but the orthodox vision of salvation. There's like this. Um, what what always bothered me was this notion of like salvation is like an on-off switch. You're saved or you're not saved, and like this, do this thing in order to be saved, and there's nothing else that you could ever do that would ever matter for anything, because this switch has been flipped. So that's kind of all there is to the Christian life.
Mm-hmm.
And the notion of like um, of I mean, Paul will say things about salvation, for example, that don't really make sense from that perspective. When he's talking about your salvation being nearer now than when you first believed, for example. Um, when I mean, when the scripture will talk about like baptism saves you, for example, like um, for if you've got this like salvation is just like this one time event sort of thing, then all that could possibly mean is like, well, I guess he's trying to say that if you're baptized, then you're saved, and if you're not baptized, then you're not saved. Um, that must be somebody's trying to make a claim that flips the switch or it doesn't. And
Mm-hmm.
depending on what type of Protestant you are, that might not fit your theology, and then you don't have any idea like what would just kind of ignore that piece of scripture there. Um, and this notion of um, salvation um, as being this. I mean, just even just to say that like a continual process, like that you would be saved every day, and that you would be constantly seeking the salvation of God in all areas of your life, in all times in your life. I mean, even like just going that far with salvation theology, like to me, that's an improvement.
Uh-huh. Um, yeah, and I think a really big problem is that, well, for one thing, the Protestant soteriological models are incorrect, they're false. And so the things that are pushed to the side because of them are real things that actually matter. And so what ends up happening is other things are imported and smuggled in, but it's in like a way that you don't even realize. You don't know it yourself. And so you will wind up having this complete philosophical system that you are completely unaware of, you're completely ignorant of. And when somebody tries to draw your attention to it, like my experience has been anyway, when you try to draw somebody's attention to the philosophical underpinnings that are operating in their worldview, that they just can't even, like, they don't even have a category for it. They're just so unequipped to deal with that.
Yeah. All right. Sorry,
Well,
I'm leaning off the screen here, giving my cat a little bit of attention.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I think I will hang it up now.
All right. I might stick around for a little bit. I'm trying to see if I can get, if somebody in the chat that's watching wants to come join the show and hang out for a bit, or anybody else. I might stay on for a little bit. We'll see.
Okay.
I got a few things I can ramble on about for those of you that are still. Thanks for all
Oh,
those that are
that's
still
really
with us.
appealing.
Huh?
I said that's really appealing.
Well, no, I'm going to keep talking a little bit about this. I don't know about this idea of the philosophical, and it does relate to the topic of the video. So it's not like a complete unrelated tangent to other people who might be tuning in now. Just kind of, I don't know, just kind of discussing what's going on with that whole thing. People not really paying attention to what they actually believe and not being aware of that.
Hmm.
But yeah, anyway, you want to go. So thanks, John,
Okay. Yep.
for being with us. And again, anybody else, if you're watching the show, I put the link in there in the chat a couple times actually. You should be able to click on that link and join the show if you'd like to. I'd love to have somebody come and hang out. And Paul, I doubt you're still watching, but maybe you are. And if you do happen to be, and you want to come and argue with me, and um, just so everybody knows, I mentioned at the beginning of the stream the other Paul who we were kind of responding to. He's an Australian, and as an Australian, he's always getting in like sarcastic fights with people, and I think a lot of people don't realize how sarcastic he is. And I just want to say, it's like, well, that kind of fits our that kind of fits our way of doing things. I don't know, as like this combination of Midwest country boys / Swiss German Mennonites / people who grew up in an excessively masculine household. Is that kind of sarcastic, I don't know, that kind of sarcastic way of doing things is very much welcome here on the Sacred Life. So the other Paul, if you're still watching, if you're still with us and you'd like to come on and fight me, come on, let's have it.
Okay. Well, I'm getting out of here. This sounds scary.
John, get out of here. John
okay.
Can't take
All right. Good night.
All right. John, do you want to like shut off your thing? I guess I'll just remove you. Anyway, so John's gone, so now it's just me that you guys have to put up with. Again, if anybody wants to hop on it and join me, I'm trying to. If you saw me kind of distracted, it's because I was kind of over here on. I don't know. Maybe you guys noticed that I look different. My setup here looks different than it usually does. That's because my laptop, the screen, something's wrong with the screen. It's not working right. I don't think the screen's broken. I think it's a setting that's causing it to not function properly. So I'm operating right now from my desktop in my studio here. So that's why things look a little different. So you get a different view. You get to see where I spend many hours sitting in the chair there behind me in front of that easel kind of thing that I made with all the pigments and everything going on there. But if you've kind of seen me distracted, it's because I'm over here on my other screen, trying to get some other people to hop on the show, see if I can drum up somebody else to come on for a little bit here. I don't know how long I'll keep going. If you guys have any questions, anything that you'd like to talk about, definitely love to have some of that. Love to have your questions. I always fail to mention it, but I do have super chats. At least I think I do. I think I still do. People could do super chats and all that stuff as well. And of course, channel memberships are certainly welcome and appreciated. And I don't know. I'm done with all that. I'll get back into talking about real things. Before John left, we were talking about kind of the philosophical entailments that exist. I don't know. I might almost try to see if I can find some of these comments. That I have to scroll down way in my history over here on X. So I doubt I'll mess with that. But I don't know. That's just kind of something I've been thinking about a lot lately. I don't know, for a long time really, but I've kind of been exploring it again. Is why is it that people have the conclusions that they have, and why does it seem so obvious to them? We kind of talked a little bit about, I don't know, if you go all the way back to the beginning of this video, we were talking about the other Paul's argument from Origen and trying to demonstrate how Origen proves that icon veneration is not an apostolic practice. That was his argument in his debate with my friend Alex Soren. And part of what I hope to accomplish in this stream tonight was to demonstrate that that's not actually a reasonable reading of Origen. But going beyond that argument, I have to ask myself the question, because I'm curious about this sort of thing, but why does that argument, or why does that reading seem so obvious to somebody like the other Paul? Or why does the way in which, a Baptist or an evangelical picks up, the book of Romans, for example, and reads it, and why is it so obvious to him that it says this sort of thing? Yeah, like what I was saying. Sorry, I was distracted by the comments over here. Why is it so obvious to him, that the book of Romans, the book of Romans obviously teaches forensic imputation and obviously teaches like this legal justification. And it's just so obvious that it teaches this. And then I pick up the book of Romans and I read it. And it's like, well, I don't think it's actually that obvious. But I don't think these people are stupid. I don't think they're idiots. I don't think they're like willfully ignorant. And so this is a question I've kind of puzzled with. And even like looking back at my own past self, kind of wrestling and wrangling with these questions. Like, how do I deal with that? Like, what is actually going on? Why is this so obvious? Or why do these people think the way they do? Why do they come to the conclusion that they do? And if you were with us, a bit ago when we were talking about these things, you kind of know the argument that I was laying out. That sorry, I'm getting over. I had a cold last week, during Holy Week of all weeks, and and I'm in the choir and singing all week, and especially like from Thursday on, basically at the church all the time, hours and hours and hours of singing. It's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of tough, and I'm kind of still recovering from the after effects of all of that. So forgive me for coughing a lot on the show here tonight. But anyway, that's something, going back to what I was talking about, that's something I've kind of puzzled with for a while, is what's actually going on. And I really want to understand. I really want to understand in everything, and I've kind of been this way for a long time. I really want to understand what is it that's going on underneath the surface. Kind of my I don't know, kind of my observation is that a lot of people really are especially concerned, are especially concerned with a very superficial level of things, and like this very surface level reading of a text, or this very surface level meaning of something. That's something that always kind of bothered me, I guess, in my own Mennonite circles growing up, was like, why do people not want to even entertain the fact that there's like a deeper meaning to this scriptural passage, or entertain the meaning that there's like a symbolic meaning in what this person is saying in this particular verse or this particular story? And why is there such a resistance to that? And really the conclusion I have is that a lot of people really don't want to examine their underlying framework because they're uncomfortable with it. And the reason I say that is because I don't know, partially because it's my own experience, is looking past the surface level, and really examining what lies under what it is that I believe, and realizing there's a lot of problems with it. And again, I really like this thing that Father Stephen pointed out the other night when I was on Alex Shorn's stream, and Father Stephen was there as well, where he was talking about people only pay attention, only care about what is necessary in their soteriology. I just thought that was a very good way of putting it. And so, I don't know, I'm kind of trying to describe this own process of mine with working through these things and trying to look past the surface. And it's like, okay, you're saying this, you believe this, you teach this, you do this. But how do these things actually fit together? And where do these things actually come from? And it can't possibly be, I believe this for a long time. Like, it can't possibly be that you look at the scriptures and the scriptures obviously say this. And it might be obvious to you. And I think for a lot of these people saying this, it is obvious to them that the scripture says this. But that was never very satisfying to me, because it's obvious to you. It's obvious to you that the scripture says this, but it's obvious to this guy that the scripture says this. And that's something that's always, I don't know, that's been fascinating to me and challenging to me for a long time, is why is that obvious? Why is it obvious to me that it says this? And why is it obvious to this guy that says that? And why are we so different? And what I ultimately had to grapple with was just the realization that, I don't know, I would say somebody like Jordan Peterson is somebody that helped me to kind of take the jumbled kind of realizations that I had and kind of help put it together. Is what's going on below the surface? What's going on? Like, there's something going on here that nobody's talking about. And now, are people not willing to talk about it? Do people not want to talk about it? Or is it just something that's just not even within the scope of what people are equipped to think about, are equipped to talk about? And that latter, I don't know, that latter point is kind of where I came down, where I think that's where most people stand. I don't think I generally try to avoid that people are willfully ignorant or that people are stupid. I think people's way of thinking makes sense to them. I think that's generally true. And I think most people are trying to do the best they can with what they've got. And so my criticism really isn't aimed at the people, like I have a comment here. I don't know, there's a number of comments here really that are critical of what Protestants are doing. But I want to try to be fair and say that for the most part, most Protestants, including most Protestant leaders and theologians, are doing the best they can with what they've got. And the problem is they're not properly equipped. And part of that is the fruits of the Reformation. Part of that is, kind of this problem that Father Stephen laid out, that their soteriological models cause them to neglect things that are very, very important. And then, this is really what I think. I think because we are neglectful of these things that are actually extremely important, that we wind up unknown to ourselves, adopting a lot of presuppositions, a lot of ideas that are very bad for us, that are very dangerous. And then it kind of becomes this, I don't know, this self-reinforcing cycle, this vicious cycle that doubles down on itself and leads you even further down this soteriological road. Where you have the situation that exists today, where evangelical and non-denominational soteriology has kicked the ball so much further down the road than anything John Calvin would have been comfortable with, or Martin Luther would have been comfortable with. It's kicked it so much further down the road because, I don't know, because of this cycle. I don't even think they started. I think it started a long time before then, but which they certainly perpetuated. And I think this comment here from Vigo hits the point right on the nose. It's because they rejected theosis. And that's something that happened well before the Reformation. Theosis in Western Christianity was falling out of view. I don't know. I would be remiss to try to diagnose when it happened, when the West forgot about theosis. But it did happen a long time before the Reformation. But it was kind of a process. But there again, I think it does go back to, I don't know, I'm not going to say that. I think that would just confuse the point I'm trying to make more than it would actually be helpful. But so the reality that we find ourselves in today, I think, is a pretty serious problem. And I was kind of playing around with this on X earlier this afternoon, late afternoon, early evening, I guess it was, with like what happens when you try to point out to people that there's this series of presuppositions that they hold to that they're not paying any attention to, and that this is where their reading of the biblical text or even the reading of the church fathers, that this is where it comes from. And again, my experience is most people just simply aren't equipped to deal with that conversation. And that's not really a criticism of them. That's not really like I'm not trying to look down on them or anything like that. I just think it's interesting to, I guess, to confirm that that's the case. Like I suspected that that would be the case. Excuse me, my nose is starting to get stuffy. But just to confirm that that is the case, that when you try to bring this up and when you try to point this out to people, we're so used to functioning in this specific theological realm that we don't know what to do when somebody tries to bring the conversation somewhere else. And what I encountered from multiple people, actually, so I'm not picking on any one person in particular or pointing to any one person in particular, but is that we can't help but return the conversation to the realm that we're more comfortable operating in. And I'm like, no, this isn't the conversation I'm trying to have. This isn't what I'm talking about. But it's just like, again, I don't think these people are being like intentionally obtuse or intentionally difficult, but it's just that I think people don't know how to operate in this philosophical realm anymore. And it's not necessary for everybody to operate in that realm, but it's just something that we've so much come to believe has nothing to do with salvation. Like John was saying before he logged off, it has nothing to do with salvation, so it's not important. Why do we even care? We've so much been conditioned to think that way, and then we've so much been conditioned to think that these philosophical conversations are unrelated to doctrinal and theological questions, that we can't help ourselves but return. And like I find myself even doing this, we can't help but return to those what we classify as theological debates or theological conversations. It's just like that's all we understand. That's all we know how to do. And even for Orthodox Christians, those of us that are converts to Orthodoxy, I think we really, really struggle with that. We really struggle with knowing how to actually talk about things in an Orthodox way. And we're always circling back. We're always finding ourselves returning to what we're comfortable with, returning to what we're used to, and no longer like understanding that these philosophical things and these theological things actually operate within the same realm. And again, because this is the way we're so used to operating, this is the way that we're so used to thinking, we wind up with this whole list of philosophical presuppositions, this whole system that operates under the surface that we're just not aware of. And I think almost any debate that's going on, especially debates going on between Orthodox Christians, a classic example would be the Latinizer controversy. I don't think it's actually that big of a deal. I think the only reason it's a big deal is because our enemies will pull out these things and try to use them to discredit us. So I think this whole debate is being artificially inflated by people who are against us, and I think we need to keep that in mind. We need to remember that, and not allow ourselves to get too caught up in these things, and also remember that these people, those of them that are actually Orthodox Christians, they are our brothers, and this is Pascha. It's not the time to be fighting with our brothers. I believe that as well. But anyway, that's beside the point of what I'm making. What I'm getting at is that this is a classic example that if you really look at it, you've like I come to the conclusion. Sorry, I lost my camera for a little bit. I'm back though. Anyway, even though I allow myself to get caught up in those conversations, um, because again, I fall back into these same patterns. I fall back into these same ways of operating. Is that the conversation that's being had isn't the real conversation. What we're talking about, like, we're never going to find resolution because the real problem lies a lot deeper than the conversation that everybody is having. And I think somebody like Father Stephen DeYoung is a good example of somebody who I think understands and points out that problem sometimes. Um, the real problem is, why do these people read these texts and come to the conclusions that they do? Or why do these people hold to these ideas and see them as operating within the Orthodox paradigm? Or even going beyond that conversation to other conversations, like, why is it that this is a reasonable position for somebody to hold? And like that's where I often find myself, again, using this specific example of the Latinizer debate, is like I often find myself in the position where I look at what these guys are saying and it's like, I don't even understand how you think that's a reasonable argument. But what's important to remember is that they do. And it's probably true that on their side of things, they don't understand how what we're saying is a reasonable argument. And the reason for that, again, is not because, like, I don't believe, like, with some exceptions, I don't believe that these people are intentionally obtuse in the same way that I don't believe that the Protestants are intentionally obtuse, and so on and so on and so on. I think the problem is these underlying philosophical frameworks that we're not paying attention to. And I kind of had this a little bit, a very brief private exchange with Perry Robin. Is it Robinson or Robertson? You know who I'm talking about. This brief private exchange with him where I have the suspicion my internet is lagging out and I'm about to go bye-bye. And if that happens, um, sorry everybody. If I'm lagging for you guys, would you leave a comment? Because I'm lagging on my screen, and that might mean my internet's about to go out. That happens sometimes, especially late at night like this. Well, I came back. I don't have a camera. I don't know if anybody's still here with me, but I do want to finish out what I was saying, at least for the sake of those of you who are here for some reason, and also for the sake of the viewers after the fact, the on-demand viewers who want to hear the rest of what I was had to say. So I'm going to finish up my thought there. Again, sorry I don't have a camera. Good to see at least Vigo is still with me here. Anyway, I do want to finish up my thought there. That when I had this, I was having this private back and forth with Perry for a little bit, and one thing he pointed out, which I thought was a good observation, is that part of the problem with a lot of these people is that they read these texts and they read people like Saint Augustine, which again, like I will always publicly affirm, Saint Augustine is a saint, and I have no problem affirming his orthodoxy. And I think, I mean, I agree with Father Stephen. I think Father Stephen knows a lot more about St. Augustine than just about anybody else. Anyway, I'm not going to get into that whole thing. I'm not trying to rehash an entire argument, an entire debate here. But Perry's observation is that, you know, like a lot of people will read these texts. They'll read people like St. Augustine or this saint or that saint. They'll read the fathers. They'll read the confessions and so on. But they don't understand they don't understand the philosophy that's at play here. And like what specifically he mentioned is that like people don't understand what St. Augustine is talking about because they haven't read Plato. And I thought like, and I told him like, that's a very good point. Like, I'm glad you said that. You know, I don't consider myself an expert on Plato. There's definitely a lot of people that are way more qualified to understand these things, have a much deeper grounding in Platonic philosophy than I do and probably ever will. But it doesn't defeat or change the fact that it doesn't defeat or change the fact that people are not aware of what's happening in these texts, and that is very, very closely related to that they're not aware of what's happening in their own system of belief. And so they're really reading into these people a way of thinking, a philosophy that is not compatible with what those people held to or believed themselves. And so that is a real problem. That's one of the reasons why these arguments, these disputes oftentimes wind up being almost irreconcilable. It does. I don't know. It presents a lot of problems. And so this is, I don't know. That's the main concern I wanted to bring out tonight is in this conversation. I want to talk about this a lot more, and I hope this can kind of, I don't know, lay down some threads, generate some interest in this idea that, again, that my premise being that like there's this whole list of presupposition. There's this entire philosophical system that a lot of people are reliant on, and almost always, and I'm including myself in this, almost always there are some big problems with it. You know, I have like I encounter this all the time where I find that there are subtle things operating below the surface that I don't realize are not actually compatible with the Christian tradition, are not actually compatible with what the fathers taught. Or there are these ideas operating subtly in the background of my thinking that have snuck in from unchristian sources, which is not to say that how should I say this? It's not to say that we can't use any of the pagan literature, we can't use any of the pagan terminology and so forth and so on, which is like the thing that Protestants, and especially more like restorationist oriented Protestants or evangelical type of Protestants, or like anybody related to the Baptists in any way, shape, or form, will try to criticize us and say, Mormons would be another example. It's like, look, you guys use all this Greek philosophy, and that's alien to Christianity. And there's something quite a lot different between using language and terminology, and even having some points of overlap with figures like Plato, and just completely using for their philosophical systems, or using ideas from them, using beliefs from them rather than merely terminology that is different than, say, what Moses taught or what the apostles taught, or is different than the philosophical system that is witnessed by the church fathers. And so, like, there are some tremendous differences between Platonic philosophy and Christian philosophy. And again, those points of difference is where I myself often find myself having to deal with things where I realize that, hey, I'm operating in a flawed way of thinking that's not actually compatible with Christianity. And so that's kind of that's kind of the point that I want to make. And I'm not laying out a whole lot of evidences and proofs of this claim in what I'm saying here right now tonight. Instead, I want to present this as a challenge to people to examine yourself, examine your thinking, examine what lies beneath the surface, what it is that you're not paying attention to. This is something I've really held to for a long time, and it's a way of thinking that ultimately I think is one of the biggest things that is responsible for leading me to the Orthodox faith and the Orthodox Church, is the idea that what you're not paying attention to is where you will fall. Where the place where you're not paying attention, that is where you will come under assault, and that is where you will be overthrown. And I think that's precisely what's happened in so many of these systems. And I look at people who say, well, philosophy has nothing to do with salvation. Philosophy has nothing to do with Christianity. Philosophy has nothing to do with the Bible, and so on and so forth. And I look at that and think that is a profoundly dangerous way of thinking. Like, you have no idea what is going on in those areas of yourself that you refuse to acknowledge, those areas of your belief system, those areas of your systems of thought and of being that you refuse to acknowledge, that you refuse to pay attention to. And so that's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of the idea I want to present to you all. I want to throw out there, because again, I go back to the conversation I was having with John earlier at the beginning of this stream about Origen and about the other Paul's reading of Origen. This is precisely what I think is actually going on with the other Paul. This is precisely what I think what you could call his problem. This is precisely what I think it is that he's got all this stuff going on that he's not paying attention to, that he's not aware of. He's not aware of what actually underpins his belief. And it just might not be Christian. So that's what I have to say tonight. I see the most of the comments I'm getting right now in the live chat are somebody who's watching but not live. So I don't know if anybody else has any comments or questions, or again, I mean, sorry, again, I don't have my camera. I did lose my camera, but that's a problem to deal with at another time. I mean, my camera's still fine. I just lost it for the remainder of the stream because of my my internet issues and everything. But still, if somebody would like to come in and talk for a little bit, I feel like by Orthodox streamer standards, this is still a short, casual stream. We could still go on for another 4 hours, and then we'd have a respectable Orthodox stream. But I don't really intend to do that. It's after midnight here where I live in Indiana. But if anybody wants to come on and talk for a little bit, if anybody wants to, if you know, if you have any questions or comments or other things that you'd like to say, um, I think there's probably a few comments I want to get to. First of all, this one from Fixated Fixer. He says, I am a Mennonite inquirer. I've been looking for Minnow to Orthodox peoples. Do you guys have an email or something? Well, I didn't bring that up to address the question about the email. But again, I made a similar content to a previous commenter that, you know, there's actually quite a few Mennonite inquirers or Mennonite converts. And something I kind of would like to do, honestly, I just got too much going on. That's why I haven't done it yet. But I hope at some point in the future I'll find the time to actually do this and organize this, is to kind of put it together a network of Mennonite converts and inquirers, and I don't know, a resource group for helping more. You know, I really do care about my own people a lot. I do fundamentally believe that the Orthodox faith is the fulfillment of my Mennonite upbringing and not the overthrow and abandonment of it. And we got some videos if you're curious. If you're curious how that works, you can check that out. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I wish one of you guys would be brave enough to hop on the stream. I have put the link on a few times. You can probably find that. I thought I had it pinned. I don't know if I successfully pinned it or not. But there's a link there if somebody would like to join the stream and talk for a little bit, hang out for a little bit. Yeah, you're certainly welcome to do that. Otherwise, I'll probably start wrapping up. Yeah, just remind everybody again, I am an iconographer. You can find links in the description to my iconography business. And I do custom work and commissions. I also sell some prints. I also make and sell icon panels. Those are some examples of my own original work. That's a great way you can support what we're doing here at The Sacred Life. You can support me because I could use your support. I'm getting married in just over a month. The end of next month, the end of May, towards the end of May, I'll be getting married. So I'm excited about that. Been a little bit busy, haven't had as much content. I didn't do basically anything at all during Lent and especially Holy Week. Jumped on a couple other guys' shows, but that's about it. Hopefully I can get back to doing a couple times a week here now that we are out of Lent and Holy Week and all of that. Yeah, I talked about some other projects earlier. Wanting to do some historical content, kind of looking at the story of the church, wanting to do some more stuff, especially tackling Anabaptist teachings, some Anabaptist content. So if any of you who are Anabaptist converts or inquirers, and you have like some specific, if you have some specific Anabaptist questions that you would like to do that, if you're watching this live, leave comments, like actual comments, not live chat, so I can more easily go back and check that later. I can check your comments more easily from YouTube Studio and find that. So that'd be nice. I mean, if you would like to do that. Yeah. But you know, I'm interested in hearing, I don't know, putting together a list again and getting back to tackling more Mennonite content. Even if it's something that we've tackled before, I think I would probably have a little bit of a different take on it now, or have more to say, be a little bit more informed on the subject now than I was at one point. So yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in. If you're not subscribed, would definitely appreciate your subscription. Definitely like this video, share this video, leave your comments, all of that, all the good stuff. Do all that, do all the things. Until next time, yeah, again, thanks everybody for joining us, and I want to wish you all peace in Christ. I'll just hang around for another minute or two. And I know there's a little bit of a lag between what I'm saying and where your comments pop up. I'll just hang out for a little bit. Just in the off chance somebody has a comment or a question or somebody like hops in the studio, but I don't think anybody's gonna. Yeah, thanks everybody. It was enjoyable. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it as well. And again, sorry about the technical issues. Hopefully that didn't detract from the experience too much.